With teary eyes, she whispered, "They said I'm useless." The silence was broken when a scar was shown to her and a staff rested in her hands. Subscribe to the channel and discover how weakness can transform into leadership and courage. The waters of the Xingu River flowed gently that September afternoon, carrying stories and secrets that only the elders knew how to decipher. Sebastian observed the undulating movement, like someone reading a sacred book. At 72 years old, the old riverbank dweller knew every murmur of those waters, every corner of the forest that embraced the small community of Santa Clara. He lived alone in a remote stilt house, built by his own calloused hands after leaving the village. The younger ones called him Tiao of the Forest, with a mix of respect and fear. They said he talked with animals, and that herbs obeyed his touch. In truth, he simply understood what few took the trouble to comprehend, the natural rhythm of things. The tranquility of that afternoon was interrupted by desperate shouts coming from the direction of the community. Sebastian raised his eyes, seeing an out-of-control canoe drifting down the river. Inside it, a girl clung to the edges in terror as the vessel dangerously spun near the rocks. "Help!" she screamed with a thin, trembling voice. Without hesitation, Sebastian dove into the waters, swimming with the strength his aging arms still preserved. He reached the canoe seconds before it would have crashed against a rocky formation. With precise movements, he directed the vessel to the shore. The girl trembled like a leaf in the wind. She was about 9 years old, with sun-bronzed skin, disheveled black hair, and large eyes that seemed to swallow the world. When she tried to get out of the canoe, Sebastian noticed she had one leg shorter than the other, and she limped visibly. "Thank you," she whispered, hugging her own wet body. "What's your name, child?" he asked with the hoarse voice of someone who rarely spoke. "Iara," she replied, still trembling. "What were you doing alone in a canoe?" She lowered her eyes, her small hands tightening on the hem of her wet skirt. "I wanted to prove I can do the same things as everyone else, but they were right. I'm just a dead weight." The harshness of those words in a child's mouth made Sebastian feel a tightness in his chest. He knew that feeling well. Rejection was an old companion. "Who said that?" he asked, helping her sit on a flat stone. "Everyone in the community. My cousins, the boys at school. Even teacher Nova said I cause more trouble than results." A solitary tear ran down the girl's face. "My father died in last year's flood. My mother works at the mining site and only returns every 2 weeks. My grandmother is sick. Nobody has patience with me." Sebastian observed the current for a few moments as if seeking answers in the waters. Then, silently, he lifted the right leg of his patched pants, revealing a deep scar that crossed his shin. "Jaguar 20 years ago. I thought I would never walk properly again." The girl looked fascinated at the mark. "And how did you manage?" The old man smiled discreetly. "I didn't. I learned to walk differently." With calm movements, he took a piece of angelin wood that he kept near his cabin. "Not every staff serves for any walker. This one was waiting for you." In the days that followed, Iara began to appear regularly at Sebastian's cabin. At first, the community didn't notice her absence. Few people really cared about the limping girl. Her grandmother, Donna Jurema, was too weak to question where her granddaughter spent her afternoons. Sebastian didn't speak much, but showed with gestures and examples. How to balance the body using the staff, how to listen to the sounds of the forest, how to navigate alone in the shallow parts of the river. They weren't lessons to make her like others, but for her to find her own way of being strong. A month after the canoe incident, the news arrived like thunder in clear skies. Vale de Uro, the mining company that already operated in the region, had obtained authorization to expand its operations. The community had 30 days to decide, either accept the resettlement proposal or be left isolated when the new channel was opened. Most were already preparing to leave. The money offered seemed like a fortune for families who lived off fishing and small crops. "They're going to destroy everything," Sebastian murmured to Iara as they watched the river's waters. "Not just the trees and animals. They'll uproot people." That night, when Iara returned home, she found her grandmother crying silently. "What's wrong, Grandma Jurema?" The elderly woman raised her tired eyes. "The company people said that in the new place we'll have better houses, a new school. But they said that people like you who need special care should go to the big city where there are doctors." Yara's heart froze. "They want to send me away." "Away from you?" Donna Jurema held her granddaughter's hands. "They say it's for your own good, that there you might even get a new leg." Yara felt the world collapse. She tightened her grip on the staff Sebastião had given her and felt tears burning her eyes. "I don't want a new leg. I want to stay with mine, with you, with the river." The crescent moon lit the path as Yara ran as fast as she could, leaning on her staff, toward Sebastião's cabin. The words of the old riverbank dweller echoed in her mind. "You are not a dead weight. You are a river that found stones in its path and now flows in a new course." She knew she would need more than a staff to face the storm that was coming. She would need the wisdom of the river's guardian. Sebastião listened attentively as Yara, between sobs, told him about Val do Uro's plans. The wrinkled face of the old riverbank dweller remained impassive, but his dark eyes revealed an inner storm. "They always come like this," he finally murmured. "First with smiles and promises, then with tractors and fences." He stood up with difficulty, leaning on his own staff carved with ancient forest symbols. "Come with me." The night was clear, illuminated by thousands of stars that reflected in the waters of the Xingu. Sebastião led Yara along a narrow trail that snaked between centuries-old trees. They walked for almost half an hour, the girl struggling to keep up with the old man's determined pace, until they reached a clearing. In the center, a majestic tree rose with thick roots that seemed to embrace the earth. "Kapok tree," he said, touching the trunk with reverence. "The mother of the forest. It was here long before any of us and will continue when we are gone." Yara felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something almost magical about that place. "My people believe these trees hold the memory of the earth," Sebastião continued. "They want us to forget who we are, where we came from. They want us to trade our roots for concrete walls." The next morning, as the community bustled with the visit of representatives from the mining company, Yara sought out Mr. Candido, the village healer. At 92, he was the oldest resident of Santa Clara, respected by all, even by the younger ones who no longer believed in the ancient traditions. She found him sitting in front of his house, weaving a basket from buriti palm fibers. "Mr. Candido, I need to talk about Val do Uro." The old man smiled, revealing few teeth. "I already know what troubles you, little Yara. You fear being separated from your grandmother." The girl nodded, surprised by the old man's insight. "How can I prevent this?" Mr. Candido set aside the basket and looked at the girl with eyes clouded by age but still penetrating. "You've been walking with Tiao of the forest." It wasn't a question. "Did he teach you to use that staff?" Yara confirmed, proud. "He taught me that my leg doesn't define who I am." The healer smiled again. "Sebastião was always wise, even when young. Do you know why he lives alone?" The girl shook her head. "He was the brightest son of the Kayapo village, a few kilometers from here. He studied in the city, returned with new knowledge. But when he refused to negotiate the traditional lands with loggers, he suffered an accident." Mr. Candido made a significant pause. "The jaguar that attacked him walked on two legs and carried a chainsaw." That revelation fell like a stone in Yara's heart. Sebastião had never spoken about his past. Why doesn't he tell this to anyone? He could help convince people not to accept the mining company's proposal. Mr. Candido sighed deeply. Some wounds are deeper than those of the flesh. He lost his trust in people, but he found a new strength in solitude, as you are finding by his side. The old healer took a small bundle of leaves and handed it to the girl. "Take this to your grandmother. It will help with the cough." In the improvised community center, the representative of Val do Uro, a man in an impeccable suit despite the Amazonian heat, spoke animatedly about the advantages of resettlement. Imagine new houses made of brick, with running water and guaranteed electricity. A modern school for the children, a health center. Yara observed from afar, hidden behind a tree, leaning on her staff. She noticed how the residents' eyes sparkled with the promises, especially the younger ones. "And for those with special needs," the man continued, "we have a rehabilitation program in the capital, state-of-the-art prosthetics, advanced treatments." At that moment, Yara felt the gazes discreetly turn to her. She felt the weight of the label she carried. The poor thing, the one who needed help, the one who slowed others down. She swallowed the lump in her throat and gripped her staff firmly. 29 days, she murmured to herself, counting the time remaining before the final decision. The weeks that followed were of intense learning. Sebastião intensified the teachings, showing Yara how to navigate the river alone, how to recognize medicinal plants, how to predict weather changes by the clouds and animal behavior. The girl absorbed everything with an insatiable thirst. "Why are you teaching me all this now?" she asked one afternoon, while learning to weave a strong rope with vegetable fibers. The old riverbank dweller remained silent for a few moments. "Because knowledge is the only thing that no one can take from you." Donna Jurema grew worse each day. Her cough became deeper, and Mr. Candido's remedy no longer had the same effect as before. "Maybe in the big city they can cure you, Grandma," Yara suggested one night, sitting beside the mat where her grandmother rested. The old woman smiled weakly. "My illness has no cure, my little one. It's the illness of time which comes for all of us." She held her granddaughter's hand with surprising strength. "But you have a long road ahead. If you need to go to the city to have a better life," Yara interrupted her grandmother. "I'm not going anywhere without you. And we don't need prosthetics or city doctors. Sebastião is teaching me to be strong in my own way." Donna Jurema looked deeply into her granddaughter's eyes. "That old man has wisdom, but he also has much bitterness stored up. Be careful not to inherit his pains along with his teachings." With just 2 weeks left until the deadline, a new character arrived in the community, Dr. Ricardo, a physician sent by the mining company to evaluate residents with health problems. Tall with small glasses and a studied smile, he visited each house, making notes on his digital clipboard. When he reached Donna Jurema's house, he examined the elderly woman with genuine attention. "Chronic pneumonia," he diagnosed. "We need to take her to a hospital immediately." Then he turned to Yara. "And you, young lady, let's take a look at that leg." The examination was quick and impersonal. "Congenital dysplasia," he murmured to himself. "With a proper prosthesis and physiotherapy, you could have a practically normal life." Yara looked at the doctor with a firm gaze that surprised him. "My life is already normal, doctor. It's just different from yours." Ricardo seemed disconcerted for a moment, but quickly recovered his professional posture. "Well, we have limited spots in the rehabilitation program. If you want a chance, you'll have to decide soon. And as for your grandmother, I strongly recommend moving her to the Central Hospital in Altamira." That night, under a heavy sky that announced a storm, Yara ran desperately to Sebastião's cabin. She found him sitting in front of the stilt house, carving a new staff. "They want to take my grandmother tomorrow, and they want to send me to a so-called rehabilitation program, far from her." The words came out rushed, mixed with tears. The old riverbank dweller put aside the knife and wood. For the first time since she had met him, Yara saw an expression of true concern on his face. "Enough of stories and indirect lessons," he said, standing up. "It's time to show the truth." The rain fell in dense curtains when Sebastião and Yara left the cabin. Even with the storm, the old riverbank dweller advanced with determination, guiding the girl through almost invisible trails in the darkness. They walked for almost an hour, protected only by improvised capes of woven straw. Yara, despite her fear and fatigue, felt a new strength in her legs. The staff, now an extension of her body, kept her steady even on the slippery terrain. Finally, they reached a clearing where an abandoned building stood, partially swallowed by the forest. "What is this place?" she asked, trying to see through the rain. "The past they want us to forget," replied Sebastião, pushing a rusted door. The interior was surprisingly preserved. Sebastião lit an oil lamp, revealing walls covered with yellowed maps and old photographs. This was the first research station in the region, even before the community existed, he explained, running his wrinkled fingers over one of the maps. "We studied the forest, the river, the natural cycles. I was the main guide, knew every corner of this piece of the Amazon." Yara looked fascinated at the photographs where a much younger Sebastião, with black hair and a proud posture, appeared alongside researchers. "What happened?" The old man sighed deeply. "We discovered gold, and with it came greed." He pointed to a detailed map showing the course of the river and markings of mineral deposits. 20 years ago, another company tried to do what Vale do Ouro wants now. I presented studies showing that diverting the river would destroy not only the forest, but contaminate the water with mercury. I was ignored. His face hardened with the memory. One night, returning from an expedition, I was attacked. Not by a jaguar, as I told you, but by hired thugs to silence me. Yara felt a shiver that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. "Why are you showing me this now?" Sebastião took one of the rolled maps and spread it on an improvised table. "Because history is repeating itself, but it can have a different ending." The map showed the entire Xingu River basin with detailed markings of depth, current, and soil composition. This is the real treasure, knowledge. With it, we can prove that the mining company's project will contaminate not only our stretch of the river, but the entire downstream region, affecting thousands of people. The next morning, as the ambulance waited to transport Dona Jurema, Yara and Sebastião headed to Mr. Candido's house. The healer received them as if already expecting the visit. "Did you bring the map?" he asked directly to Sebastião, who nodded. The three gathered in the small dirt floor room, studying the document by candlelight. "We need more than old maps," pondered Mr. Candido. "We need current evidence and someone the white men respect to present it." As if responding to an invisible call, a knock sounded at the door. It was Dr. Ricardo, coming to check if Dona Jurema was ready for transport. He was surprised to find the three bent over maps and documents. "What's going on here?" Mr. Candido rose slowly, looking at the doctor with intensity. "The question, doctor, is what's happening with your conscience? Did you come here to heal or to help destroy?" Ricardo seemed disconcerted. "I'm here to help sick people. Mining is not my area." Sebastião unrolled the main map, pointing to areas marked in red. "These are mercury contamination zones from the previous operation 20 years ago. We still find deformed fish, children with neurological problems in the villages downstream." The doctor adjusted his glasses, examining the markings with growing interest. "Are these scientific data or speculations?" In response, Sebastião opened a worn folder, revealing reports with university letterheads. "Official research archived and ignored. We've continued collecting samples all these years." Something changed in Ricardo's gaze, a spark of doubt, perhaps of conscience. "Why are you showing me this?" It was Yara who answered, advancing with her staff. "Because you are a doctor. You swore to protect lives, not destroy them." She pointed to the window where the ambulance waited. "My grandmother needs treatment, yes. But taking everyone away and poisoning the river is not the solution. It's just trading one disease for another." The following days were of intense activity. With the reluctant but growing help of Dr. Ricardo, Sebastião and Yara began to gather more evidence. The doctor, impressed by the determination of the girl and the wisdom of the old riverbank dweller, used his authority to postpone the removal of Dona Jurema, claiming the need for preliminary local treatment. He also obtained equipment to analyze water and soil samples, confirming the presence of contaminants at alarming levels in areas affected by the previous mining operation. The community, however, remained divided. The younger ones, seduced by promises of modernity and money, pressed for acceptance of Vale do Ouro's proposal. The older ones hesitated, attached to the land where their ancestors had lived, but tempted by the prospect of better living conditions. "We need to show them what's really at stake," said Yara during a meeting in Sebastião's cabin, where Mr. Candido and Dr. Ricardo now also joined. With only 5 days left until the final deadline, an opportunity arose. The mining company would organize a big party in the community, with barbecue, music, and a detailed presentation of the resettlement project. All residents would be present, as well as the company directors. "It's our chance," stated Yara, her eyes shining with determination. Sebastião, who rarely showed emotions, smiled discreetly. The girl who had arrived trembling in an out-of-control canoe was now leading a resistance. The plan was audacious. During the presentation, when everyone was gathered, they would expose the collected evidence. Ricardo would use his credibility as a doctor to present data on contamination. Mr. Candido would mobilize the elders to share oral histories of destruction caused by similar projects in other communities. And Yara would be the voice that everyone needed to hear. On the eve of the big day, while adjusting the final details, a boat arrived at the community. It was Helena, Yara's mother, returning from the mining site earlier than expected. Upon learning of her mother's illness and the mining company's plans, she was visibly disturbed. "Why didn't anyone tell me before?" she questioned, while arranging her few clothes in the small house she shared with Jurema and Yara. The girl observed her mother with a mix of joy at the reunion and apprehension about what would come. "I thought the mail carrier had delivered my letter," she replied timidly. Helena sat in the hammock, running her hands over her tired face. She was a beautiful woman, with strong indigenous features, but with deep circles under her eyes and hands calloused by hard work. "Kiara, maybe we should consider Vale's proposal. In the resettlement, your grandmother would have access to doctors. And you—" She looked at her daughter's leg with a pained expression. Kiara felt her stomach sink. Even her mother saw her as a problem to be solved. "Mom, it's not that simple," she began, gripping her staff tightly. "They're going to destroy the river, contaminate the water." "I have proof." Helena frowned. "What proof? And since when did you become an expert in mining?" Kiara took a deep breath. "I'm not an expert, but I learned from someone who is. Sebastião, the riverbank dweller who lives isolated. He has studies, documents, and Dr. Ricardo confirmed everything with new tests." The mention of the riverbank dweller made Helena visibly shudder. "You've been walking with Tio of the forest?" "Kiara, he's dangerous. A madman who lives talking to himself in the forest." Revolt grew inside the girl. "He's not crazy. He's the wisest man I've ever met. It was he who saved me when no one else cared, when everyone called me a dead weight." The words came out louder than she intended, causing Dona Jurema to wake from her feverish sleep. "Helena," called the old woman with a weak voice. "Listen to your daughter. She is no longer the insecure girl you left behind." The woman approached her sick mother, adjusting the covers over her fragile body. "Mom, I just want the best for both of you. If in the city there is treatment—" Jurema raised a wrinkled hand, silencing her daughter. "Sometimes the best medicine is to remain rooted in your own land. Yara discovered this. Perhaps you also need to rediscover it." That night, under a starry sky, Yara took her mother to Sebastião's cabin. The meeting was initially tense. Helena knew him from the stories that circulated in the community, from the legends that painted him as a reclusive sorcerer or a traumatized madman. What she didn't expect was the clarity in his eyes, the firmness of his speech, the impeccable logic of his arguments when he explained the situation. "Tomorrow is the decisive day," he concluded, after showing all the documents. "Everyone will be gathered. It's our only chance to change the course of this story." Helena remained silent for long minutes after the explanation. Finally, she turned to her daughter, observing her with new eyes. She saw how Yara moved with confidence despite her deficient leg, how she articulated complex thoughts with surprising maturity, how the staff in her hands seemed more a symbol of power than a support for weakness. "When did you grow up so much, my daughter?" she asked with a choked voice. As they returned home under the moonlight, Helena asked one last question. "And if we can't convince them tomorrow?" "If the community votes for resettlement anyway." Yara stopped, looking at the river that sparkled with silver reflections. "Then we will have done our part. As Sebastião says, the river always finds its way even when stones appear in its bed." The day dawned clear, with an intensely blue sky that seemed to announce great events. The community of Santa Clara buzzed with activity from early on. Fail to Uro employees set up colorful tents in the central square, installed sound systems, and organized tables with white tablecloths where food and drinks would soon be served. Children ran excitedly, attracted by the unusual movement. Adults talked in small groups, some anxious, others apprehensive about the decision they would make by the end of that day. In Dona Jurema's small house, Yara prepared herself with a racing heart. She wore her best clothes, a simple blue dress her mother had brought from the city, and tied her hair with a colorful ribbon. She looked at herself in the piece of mirror, hanging on the wooden wall, and barely recognized her own image. She was no longer the insecure girl from 2 months ago. Her eyes reflected a determination that came from within, a strength that no one could take from her. She took the staff carved by Sebastião, now decorated with forest symbols that she herself had added, and kissed her grandmother's feverish forehead. "I'm going to fight for us, Grandma, for all of us." Helena entered the room carrying a small package. "I brought something for you," she said, extending the package to her daughter. Chiara opened it carefully, revealing a necklace of colorful seeds with a small pendant of carved wood in the shape of a fish. "It belonged to your great-grandmother, who also had one leg shorter than the other. She fished better than any man in the village." The girl put on the necklace, feeling the comforting weight of the pendant on her chest. "Thank you, Mom." In the center of the community, the directors of Vale do Ouro arrived in powerful boats, wearing expensive clothes that contrasted with the local simplicity. Among them was Carlos Mendez, the main executive, a middle-aged man with a rehearsed smile and calculating eyes. He was received with deference by the community leader, Juan Paulo, a fisherman who had been won over by the promise of becoming a supervisor in the new settlement. The party was beginning to take shape, with loud music and the smell of roasted meat perfuming the air. Sebastião observed everything from afar, partially hidden by the shadow of a mango tree. At his side, Dr. Ricardo nervously reviewed his notes and the results of the water analyses. "Are you sure this will work?" asked the doctor, adjusting his glasses for the 10th time. The old riverbank dweller kept his gaze fixed on the movement. "No, but it's our only chance." Mr. Candido joined them, bringing with him 3 elders from the community who had agreed to testify. "The river spirits are agitated today," commented the healer, looking at the sky. "Storm approaching." At noon, with the entire community gathered, Carlos Mendez climbed onto the small improvised stage. With a voice amplified by the microphone, he began his rehearsed speech about progress, development, and opportunities. Projectors showed seductive images of the future settlement: brick houses in rows, a school with computers, a modern health center. "We are offering not just financial compensation," he announced with theatrical enthusiasm, "but a better future for your children and grandchildren." It was then that Yara emerged from the crowd, walking with firm steps supported by her staff. A murmur ran through the audience, some surprised, others embarrassed by the interruption. The girl did not hesitate. She advanced until she was a few meters from the stage and raised her clear and firm voice. "And what about the river? How much is the clean water we drink worth? How much is mercury-free fish worth? How much is our history worth?" Carlos Mendez seemed disconcerted for a moment, but soon recovered his professional composure. "Ah, you must be the girl, Yara. We were just talking about our special rehabilitation program. With a modern prosthesis, you'll be able to run and play like any normal child." He smiled condescendingly, expecting applause that didn't come. A heavy silence took over the environment. "I don't need your prostheses," replied Yara, raising her staff. "This is my support, my strength. What I need is for everyone to know the truth about what will happen to our river if the project goes ahead." She turned to the gathered community. "Many of you didn't even notice me before. I was the poor thing, the one who slowed others down. But in these 2 months I've learned more about our land and our water than in my entire life. And I discovered something that everyone needs to know." At that moment, Sebastião advanced, followed by Dr. Ricardo and Mr. Candido. The doctor carried a folder with documents and a tablet where the results of the analyses were recorded. The old riverbank dweller brought the ancient maps, and the healer came accompanied by the elders, living witnesses of the history that was repeating itself. "This man," Yara pointed to Sebastião, "is not a forest madman as many think. He was a researcher, knows every bend of the Singu River better than any Vale do Ouro engineer, and he has proof that diverting the river will contaminate our water with mercury and other heavy metals." A growing murmur took over the crowd. Carlos Mendez tried to regain control of the situation. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's not let unfounded stories disrupt this great opportunity." Dr. Ricardo climbed onto the stage, taking the microphone. "As a doctor, I have an ethical obligation to inform about public health risks. I analyzed water and soil samples following rigorous scientific protocols. The results are alarming." He projected graphs and tables on the screen, showing high levels of contamination in areas affected by the previous mining operation. "This is not an isolated case. There are consistent studies showing that operations like the proposed one cause permanent damage to the ecosystem and human health." Carlos Mendez's expression hardened. With a gesture, he called security guards who positioned themselves strategically. "Doctor, I appreciate your concern, but our environmental impact studies were approved by the competent authorities." He turned to the community with a forced smile. "Don't let unfounded fears disrupt your future. Think of the opportunities, the new houses, the school for your children." It was then that Donna Jurema appeared, supported by Helena. The old woman, even weakened by illness, radiated a dignity that silenced everyone. With a weak but audible voice in the silence that formed, she spoke. I was born in this land 78 years ago. I've seen the river rise and fall more times than I can count. I've seen strangers come with promises and leave behind destruction. What kept us alive wasn't concrete walls or money in our pockets. It was the land that feeds us, the river that quenches our thirst, the forest that protects us. Mr. Candido advanced, leaning on his own staff. 20 years ago, another company came with the same promises. Some of us believed. Many left for the so-called resettlement. Do you know where they are now? In the slums of Altamira, without land, without river, without dignity. And those who stayed saw the river slowly die, poisoned by mercury. One of the elders who accompanied him raised his deformed hands. I fished in these contaminated waters for years. See the result. Another showed photographs of children with neurological problems born after the previous contamination. Is this the future you want for your children and grandchildren? The crowd was visibly impacted. Even those most enthusiastic about the mining company's proposal now exchanged worried glances. Carlos Mendez, realizing he was losing control of the situation, made one last effort. I understand your concerns, but our operation uses modern, sustainable technology. The problems of the past will not be repeated. Yara advanced, stopping exactly in the center of the square. If it's true that your technology is so safe, why don't you use it without diverting the river? Why can't you mine while respecting our way of life, our land? She looked directly into the businessman's eyes. The truth is that it would be less profitable. You prefer to remove us, separate us, break us, because it's cheaper than doing the right thing. A thunder resounded in the distance, as if nature endorsed her words. Dark clouds approached rapidly, announcing a storm. The wind began to agitate the canvas of the tents. Carlos Mendez consulted his watch, visibly impatient. We need to conclude this meeting. The proposal is on the table and the deadline is today. Those in favor of resettlement, raise your hand. Some arms began to rise hesitantly but stopped midway. João Paulo, the community leader who had been co-opted by the mining company, looked at the ground, visibly in conflict. Yara approached him. Uncle João, you've known me since I was born. You've seen me stumble, fall, be left behind. But you're also seeing me now standing, fighting for what is ours. We don't need their crumbs. We can build our own future without destroying what sustains us. Juan Paulo raised his eyes, meeting the girl's firm gaze. Something changed in his expression. He turned to Carlos Mendez. We want more time. And we want an independent assessment of the environmental impact. A murmur of approval ran through the crowd. The Vale do Ouro executive frowned. The deadline is today. There is no negotiation. It was then that the sky came down. An intense rain began to fall, forcing everyone to run for shelter. The tents set up by the mining company did not resist the strong wind, collapsing in a confusion of canvas and metal structures. In the midst of the chaos, Helena climbed onto the stage and took the abandoned microphone. The meeting is suspended. We will continue when everyone can be properly heard. 3 days later, with the community still divided but determined to seek more information, the news arrived. The federal justice had granted an injunction suspending the mining project until independent studies were carried out. The action had been filed by a coalition of environmental organizations, fed by documents and evidence provided by Sebastião Ricardo, and surprisingly by Helena, who had activated contacts from her days of indigenous activism. Santa Clara experienced weeks of intense activity. Journalists, researchers, and representatives of NGOs arrived daily, interested in the case that was gaining national repercussion. Chiara became a kind of unofficial guide, leading visitors through the community with her staff always in hand, explaining the relationship of the riverbank dwellers with the river and the forest. She didn't hide her deficient leg. On the contrary, she had transformed it into a symbol of resistance. Just as I learned to walk in my own way, our community is learning to develop while respecting who we are. Donna Jurema, after receiving appropriate treatment brought by Dr. Ricardo, who had decided to remain in the community, was slowly recovering. Mr. Candido, with Helena's help, began to document the traditional knowledge about medicinal plants and natural cycles of the region, and Sebastião reluctantly accepted the role of technical consultant for the environmental studies that would be carried out. 6 months later, a new proposal emerged, a sustainable management cooperative that would allow controlled extraction of natural resources without diverting the river or removing the community. It didn't offer instant wealth, but promised long-term sustainability. The initiative had support from universities and international environmental conservation funds. Santa Clara voted unanimously for acceptance. On the morning when the agreement was officially signed, Yara walked to Sebastião's cabin. She found him sitting by the river, as on the day they met. But now he wasn't alone. A group of children surrounded him, some with visible disabilities, others simply curious, all attentive to his stories and teachings. Seeing her, the old riverbank dweller smiled. They didn't need words. Yara sat beside him, and together they watched the river that continued its eternal course, overcoming stones, circumventing obstacles, always finding its way. A year later, Santa Clara had transformed, not into a set of standardized concrete houses, but into a vibrant community that valued its roots while embracing new possibilities. The school was renovated and now included traditional knowledge in its curriculum. The health center combined conventional medicine with ancestral wisdom of medicinal plants. And in the center of the square, where the end of the community had almost been decided, a simple statue now stood, a carved staff planted in the earth, with water flowing from its base, symbol of the strength that comes not from hiding differences, but from honoring them. Yara, now 11 years old, had become an assistant teacher at the school. Twice a week, she took the students to the forest, teaching them to listen to the river, to recognize plants, to respect natural cycles. Many children carried their own staffs, not because they needed physical support, but because they had learned its deeper meaning. The path is made by walking, each at their own pace, but together forming a current impossible to be stopped. On a clear afternoon, Yara guided a group of visitors, researchers interested in the sustainable development model that Santa Clara was implementing. She stopped by the river, at the exact spot where she had once almost drowned in an out-of-control canoe. "What we learned," she said with wisdom that seemed to transcend her age, "is that our greatest strength comes from what many consider weakness. My deficient leg taught me to observe, to think before acting, to find my own balance. Our small and apparently fragile community learned to unite, to value the knowledge of the elders, to question what seemed inevitable." She pointed to the horizon, where the Xingu River snaked through the lush forest. "This is our real treasure, not the gold that shines for a moment and then disappears, but the water that sustains life, the land that feeds us, the wisdom that passes from generation to generation." She raised her carved staff, now covered with symbols that told her own journey. "As my master said, the river always finds its way, even when stones appear in its bed. And so on the banks of the Xingu, the girl who was once called a dead weight became the beating heart of a reborn community. Not because she overcame her difference, but because she transformed it into a bridge. Not because she denied the pain, but because she used it as a lever to lift not only herself, but everyone around her." And Sebastião, the guardian of the river, observed with serene satisfaction the seed he had planted flourish beyond his boldest hopes. This story touched me deeply. If you were also moved by the journey of Yara and Sebastião, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more narratives that make us reflect on our connection with nature and the value of our differences.